Sorry.
No problem, no problem. Okay, going to come to order? Thank you. Good evening, welcome to the Thursday, December 16th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. This is the last meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation for the year. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm so happy we're all together because it sounds so much better than on Zoom, the Pledge of Allegiance. First, Selectman Camillo.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can you turn on the mic? Thanks.
There it is. Sorry. Good evening, everybody. First, I wanted to thank this board for the last 2 years of service. You served at a really particularly hard time in this nation's history, and I think the record books will show that you performed really well under pressure. So thank you for stepping up and doing the job you did. I have 4 proclamations, and the good news is I won't read them all because I know you have a busy meeting here, and what I'll do is I'll summarize. I'll read the last whereas, then the end of the proclamation, and I'll do it in the order of the days that we're going to next week. So we have 4 days next week. So we're going to start off with Monday, and Monday is Deborah Hess Day in Greenwich. So Deborah has been a resident for 13 years here, and she served 4 years on this board, served in numerous other endeavors around our town, and has boundless energy, as you all know. And she also served a lot of education stuff for her daughter's school, so thank you for that. But her energy is limitless, and she has lots of sayings around her house. And one I particularly like is that hard work beats talent. And you certainly have both, and you've exhibited both in everything you've done here in town. So whereas Deborah Hess is leaving the Board of Estimate and Taxation, now, therefore, I, Fred Camillo, First Selectman of the Town of Greenwich, do hereby proclaim Monday, December 20th, 2021, as Deborah Hess Day in the Town of Greenwich, and encourage all our citizens in recognizing her years of service and dedication to our community. Congratulations, Deborah, and thank you. Next up, which is Tuesday, the 21st, and that's going to be Andreas Andy Deuce Day. Andy is a 41-year resident of our town and 4 years on this board also. You also served on the RTM, and the good news with Andy is that I think you're going to be sticking around helping us out in some other endeavors in the very near future, so you're not really going away. So, but just on this board, thank you so much. You've contributed so much. I certainly have benefited by your expertise and everything that I've called on you to help us with. So a grateful town says thank you. So whereas Andy Deuce is leaving the Board of Estimate and Taxation, now therefore I, Fred Camillo, the First Selectman of the Town of Greenwich, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, December 21st, 2021, as Andreas Andy Deuce Day in the Town of Greenwich, and encourage all our residents in recognizing the years of dedicated service to our community. Thank you, Andy. Okay, next we're going to Wednesday, and that is Beth Kremick Day. Beth is a 37-year resident of the town. She served 6 years on this board and was also an RTM member and many other things and many other passions. And certainly everything you've stood for, whether I agreed with you or not, you really gave it 100%. And it's, I think your legacy will always be that you gave 100% and believed in what you said. And I, speak for a lot of people, and thank you for doing that. So whereas Beth Kremick is leaving the Board of Estimate and Taxation, now therefore I, Fred Camillo, the First Selectman of the Town of Greenwich, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, December 22nd, 2021, as Elizabeth Beth K. Kremick Day in the Town of Greenwich, and encourage all our residents in recognizing her years of dedicated service to our community. Thank you, Beth, and good luck. And last but not least, we go to Thursday. And that's Harry J. Fisher II. Now, Harry is serving his second stint. And like a relief pitcher, he came in to fill out a term this past year. And we were talking before I compared you to a baseball manager, but you're more like a relief pitcher that came in and got the game finished in the right way. Harry's been a resident here for a lifelong resident. You served, I believe, 6 years before?
6 years before.
Yeah, and then finished out this term and was also an RTM member.
Correct.
So again, that's dedication, stepping up after he completed his service here. So thank you, Harry, for again twice answering the call. Whereas Harry Fisher is leaving the Board of Estimate Taxation for a second time, now therefore I, Fred Camillo, the first selectman of the town of Greenwich, do hereby proclaim Thursday, December 23rd, 2021, as Harry J. Fisher II in the town of Greenwich, and encourage all our citizens to join me in recognizing his years of dedicated service to our community again. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, First Selectman Camillo. Now we've got the whole week covered by the BET next week. Move on to our regular agenda. Okay, request for budget adjustments.
Yes, we have 2 non-routine applications. The first one is CC2 from the Conservation Commission for $13,700, which is an interim appropriation.
And do we have a committee report?
Yes. Do we need to second that?
Seconded.
Ms. Sesto, Pat Sesto, the department head, explained that the first phase of the Coastal Resiliency Plan had overruns because it was learned during the process that the public didn't actively engage in crafting the plan, and more work was needed to be done by a team of department heads and a consultant. I think they created a story map, as Pat explained to us. Additionally, 1 season of planning had been lost due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The first phase of the plan was funded by bonding, and the second phase of the plan is funded from the Capital Non-Recurring Fund. That's as proposed. It was suggested that the application identify the 2,000 for contingencies, and I believe now that it's consistent between the memo and the blue sheet. And the committee suggested that Ms. Sesto ask the town administrator, Ben Branyon, if the Coastal Resiliency Plan qualified for the American Rescue, for the ARP funding, so that future reimbursement might be anticipated. This item was approved by the Budget Committee 400 as a routine. It was actually approved as a routine application. Thank you. But it was approved 400.
Thank you. Any questions from individuals?
I would add something.
Yes, Mr. Raymer.
Yeah, just two quick thoughts. The supporting materials that appear in the packet talk about the application as being $11,700. You'll note that the application itself actually is at $13,700. The $2,000 differential is a contingency that was added at the recommendation of the budget director.
Was fixed.
The one I had in my package still says 11,000, but secondly, the supporting materials also talk about the original application being phased, and that the subsequent phase at $100,000 is for the determining the vulnerability of the infrastructure of some of the town assets, and those were the sums that were deferred this past spring. They've actually been deferred twice. I'm pretty sure they'll be coming before us again in the spring, and I'm looking forward to perhaps it being approved at that time. I have nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hess?
Hi, I just was wondering, there's just a lot of money out there, especially on conservation, through grants. As you look at this, the overage and kind of some of these upcoming projects, kind of where are you in terms of trying to get some money through the grants process?
So the overages would not be covered through any of the grant process because the report was underway and wouldn't be eligible. But the projects that we are asking for money in this upcoming budget season, there is a potential that we would be able to secure funds. It's always an unknown. I think it's prudent for Greenwich to plan on spending that money, and if we get a grant, then great. But if we wait for a grant and it doesn't come, or we fail to qualify, then we're further behind than we should be. Grants tend to be more focused towards actually implementing a project than design, but I do know that there is some design money out there. It will depend how we stack up against a competitive field.
And I just wanted to follow up on that. As you know, Connecticut has the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, also known as CIRCA. And, if you look on their website, they did provide funding for the Norotan Heights Flood Mitigation Project, as well as Stanford had a project as well looking at one of the Stanford High School, because it's used as an emergency facility. They wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to get flooded out. There are some grants out there that they're accepting proposals for, so I'm hoping that we're going to be aggressive in doing that.
Oh, absolutely. Asking for money as part of our budget is a step. Again, there are things that we want to do. We can't guarantee that we're going to get funding, but it is not instead of seeking funds. So whether it's the bike study, the report planning for implementation, yes, definitely be going after those funds.
Okay, because the US EPA also has a number, climate change is the big buzzword now, so there's a lot of money out there, and I'm hoping that we're being aggressive in doing that.
Yes.
As far as the bike study, just as an aside, I'll put you in contact with my sister, who is now mayor of Cranberry, New Jersey, who got a bike study done for nothing for their town. So I'll put you in
Bring it on,
contact with
yes.
her. The other thing that I'm just curious about is what exactly is going to be on the website? I'm a little confused as to this. Is it a map? Is it interactive? Is it something? I'm for $88,700. What are we getting for this?
The piece that's going to be on the website, which was not part of the original proposal at all, will take a reader through the elements of the report, and they'll have access to the maps, which show the different decades of inundation, erosive risk, as well as the inundations based on various storms going through the end of this century. It is a more user-friendly tool than just the report itself. It gets to the heart of the matter. And again, that was not part of the original proposal, and we think it's money well spent so that the education aspect, right out of the gate, we're going to be up and running with that.
So just so I understand this is going to be put on the website, but it's going to basically walk people through the report or bring them to different areas in a user-friendly way?
Yes, a more interesting way to work your way through the information.
Okay, and is the report completed?
It is completed through, there's 3 elements to it. One is complete. The one associated with the 4 town ponds has final revisions, as well as the strategic recommendations. That is waiting to do its final revisions too.
Okay. I'd be curious to see it anyway, once it's published and ready.
It's an interesting look.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay. Should we take a record vote? To you.
I'd ask if all those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed. That was unanimous.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So this will be going to the RTM. We got you, Leslie. And so this will be going to the RTM, so you know, in January. Okay, thank you.
Our next item is from, item.
Put your mic on.
Thank you very much. Is item TA3 from TAG in the amount of $76,000, which is a release of conditions on the contribution.
Okay, moved and seconded by
Seconded.
Leslie Tarkington. Tag, go ahead, Leslie.
Mr. Mark Miller, who's with us this evening also, the president of the TAG board, and the treasurer too, I believe, updated the committee on changes in fundraising and the agency's forecast for year end. He described an uptick in business from agency and corporate sources, and then obviously now the continuing food delivery services with neighbor to neighbor. So he expects a reduction, I guess, at some point in time in food delivery for the Department of Health and the neighbor to neighbor, and therefore a reduction in their revenues, and grants are being sought, and also additional fundraising is needed. So this is a request to release the condition on the fourth quarter of funds, and this is the second half of the second half, and the committee voted 4-0-0, and that motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion? Questions? Deborah?
Hey, how are you? Listen, I really appreciate what TAG did and you all did in stepping up during COVID. My question is, kind of where do you see, we don't know when we're going to be in a post-COVID environment, right? Because every time we think we're kind of getting out of it, we have another strain. But having said that, food delivery, is that like where you're thinking is the permanent long-term plan, or are you thinking you go back, if we when and if and when we get to a more stable post-COVID environment, that you'll go back to what the original purpose of TAG was?
So, good question, and it's something that we have been focusing on as we move through this ever-changing COVID environment. Our expectation has always been that at some point there will be a new normal, at whatever that new normal is. When the onset of the pandemic hit in town, all of the agencies that we did business with closed, and food delivery was 100% of what we were doing early on. Over the course of the rollout, as we've gone through the ups and downs and the new variants and what have you, it's been rocky, but our agencies have been coming on board, those that could, and we fully expect that whether it's halfway through this next fiscal year, our fiscal year ends June 30th, so whether it is a year from now or beyond, we do expect there will be a return to predominantly agency-wide business. But the food delivery that we are doing in the community is a reflection of food insecurity. The level of food insecurity in the town prior to COVID that we would need to support delivering food from our food pantry was about 50 families. The peak after COVID hit, we ramped up fairly rapidly up to well over 500, and 550 was actually the peak that we arrived at. We averaged 500 families over the course of our first full year in the COVID environment. And we're expecting that in this year, even though we're running at about 400 to about 450, 430 today, the expectation, absent any major changes for Omicron, would be that we would have reduced that number in half by the time we get to the end of this year. We may not get there because we can't foresee what will happen, but that's what our forecasting model suggests today. Down to about 225 households, that's still a factor of 4 times pre-COVID levels. So it's well off the peak of COVID, but it is reflective of what we, and by we, I'm talking about our partners, the Department of Human Services and Neighbor to Neighbor, are expecting as we move to a stabilized post-COVID new normal.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Okay.
All those in favor of the release of conditions, please raise your hand. And those opposed? That was unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you all for your support.
We next have a routine application, GM1 from GEMS, $2,391,153, which is a release of conditions.
Okay, and that does not require a report, so can go directly to a vote.
And I'll second.
Oh, okay, seconded by Leslie Tarkington.
All those in favor of this routine application, please raise your hand. All those opposed? That was unanimous.
Thank you. Okay, next up is the assessor's report. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to
Long
be
time
back.
no see.
Good evening, Madam Chair, fellow members of the BET. I'd like to present the assessor's report for December 2021. Okay, before I get into the revaluation, there's just one quick note as to litigation. We actually had a trial on November 22nd. It was via Zoom in New Britain. I would imagine briefs still have to be filed. I would imagine we will get a determination sometime this spring, 2022. Okay. Revaluation 2021. We are currently conducting informal hearings for both residential and commercial properties. To date, we have had 495 residential hearings scheduled. Last time in 2015, we had over 1,300. So I think we're doing a pretty good job there. We will be having the informal hearings through January 12th. As far as commercial hearings are concerned, we've had 25 hearings for 37 properties, and they have another 3 scheduled in the month of January. So compared to what we've had in prior revaluations, I think this year we've prepared, it's gone fairly well. Can't complain so far. We'll knock on wood, though. In addition to that, we are starting to canvass neighborhoods, those neighborhoods that were affected adversely by Storm Ida. What we're trying to ascertain is those homes, because we've had, some of the people have actually appeared in the informal hearing process, and we're dealing with those as well. But we also want to ascertain which homes had had substantial damage, because we can actually make an adjustment, because it happened prior to October 1st. We can make an adjustment to these homes, and if they are not habitable at this point in time, we can certainly make an adjustment, and that way their July 2022 tax bill will reflect the damage that was done and what has occurred. So hopefully we started it this week. We will continue next week and into the month of January, and we will try to get to as many houses and many streets as possible. So if anybody knows of anybody, we have a special email address we're having for people to actually send their information and pictures and any documentation that they may have, and that's the 2021 revaluation at greenwichct.org. Okay. Anybody have any questions for me this evening?
Do you have a
I
motion?
move we accept the report.
And I would second that.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? That was unanimous.
Thank you. Have a good holiday. Comptroller's report, Pete.
Good evening, Madam Chair, BET members. We've had a pretty busy week. We had the annual presentation by RSM US LLP, the outside auditors, this morning. You will be addressing the annual financial report under new business. We also had the outsourced internal audit auditors gave a presentation on the golf course audit. And tomorrow we have presentations, credit review presentations with Moody's at 9 o'clock. We have S&P at 10:30. I've sent the invite for each to the 12 of you and to the 4 new members, and everybody has a copy of the credit presentation. Let me know if anyone did not get it, and I'll resend it. Also, I'll resend the roster where the 12 members picked. As you know, the law department opined that you can't have more than 6 BET members. This is the current BET members. The 4 unsworn ones can come in as observers. I'll resend that roster, and I think we had 7 under one of them, either S&P or Moody's, and Mr. Raymer has agreed to drop off, so I'll resend that. We're going to market for $40 million on January 5th. We're going for 75 bond anticipation notes bands on the same day, 11 and 11:30 in the morning. One of the things we are going to do is we are going to extend the bans to 13 months. The due date will be February 9th, 2022. Why? This will take the pressure off the financial advisor, the finance department, and the auditors. With the extension into February, we don't have to do the credit reviews until the month of January
Next year.
in 2022. If I could, through the chair, to a question Ms. Moriarty asked, we did contact, first of all, I read the bond resolution, and it does specifically speak to the bans, the temporary financings. I interpret it as it goes by state statute, and it was confirmed that we can do bans per the bond resolution and state statutes for up to 18 months. I'm sorry, 24 months, 2 years. So I will entertain any questions.
Andy?
Thank you, Peter. Did I misunderstand you? Did you say the maturity for these bans will be February 22 or 23?
I'm sorry, 23, a year from, I'm still in 21, okay. It'd be 23, February 23, sorry.
Yes, Mr. Raymer.
So does that mean then the second year of bans will have to be then only 11 months? Is that how that's going to work?
No, we can go to, back to the 12 months. We could stay with the 12
But
months.
if the first one is,
It's getting the cycle to go later into the year. It's, the second year will be a little less than 12 months, it will be the end of January.
this is very much out of my wheelhouse, but I thought that we were limited on the bans to, in the aggregate, 2 years. And if the first one is 13 months and the second one is 12 months, aren't we then 1 month over? But maybe I'm incorrect about the
I'm not sure
limitation.
if it addresses the specifics. It's ban bonds, and I don't believe it addresses, I'm looking at the expert in this area, Mr. Deuce. I could follow up on that, Mr. Raymer.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Cruiser.
Thank you. A quick question on the maturity timing. Sometimes when the maturities are not sort of typical timeframes, like a year, 18 months, 2 years, supply demand gets a little strange, at least in the bond terms. I'm not sure about bans. Has bond counsel given an opinion as to whether there will be, an interest rate penalty for being not 12 months? Or
No.
Is that
No.
not at all?
Yeah. And don't forget that the rates on the bands are extremely low. It's the additional month is only a few $10,000 or $20,000 with the addition.
So no effect on demand for it being not a typical maturity?
Not on short-term notes. And just to follow up on Jeff's question is, we also had the option of doing a less than 12 months, like a 7-month maturity, and then getting it passed. Unfortunately, that's not feasible because you'd have to pay for bond counsel, credit reviews, full disclosure all over again. So we decided to go the safer route and go 13 months instead of ban within that 13-month period. Any questions on the Comptroller's report?
No.
I move to accept the controller's report.
Moved by Ms. Tarkington, seconded by Mr. Raymer.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? That was unanimous.
And the treasurer's report.
Do you want me to go over the Treasurer's report? Any of the highlights or any questions on the Treasurer's report?
I would move the acceptance of the treasurer's report.
And I second that.
Moved by Mr. Raymer, seconded by Ms. Tarkington.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Abstentions? That was 1101.
Moving on to new business. Okay, we've got the tax collector tax delinquent policy statement. Welcome, tax collector Heather Smeriglio and attorney Kokinos. See, I'm Greek, I can say it correctly.
Well, say it again, can I hear it?
Kokinos.
My name is Dennis Kokinos, just for the record, partner at MZS Law. the task that I have to help the town of Greenwich is basically limited to helping Lauren with the tax appeals and Heather with the tax collection matters. What I was asked to get involved in with Heather is to focus on a tax collection policy that would assure the BET that any taxes that may be rolling off or getting close to the 15-year list that is no longer foreclosable is monitored, so that the BET and the tax collector can have a useful discussion as to whether or not it's worth pursuing those taxes that have been lingering for quite some time, or if it's something that should just be added to the suspense list. The tax collection policy was larger at one point. It has shrunk a bit, and I think working through the liaison committee, the reason for that is a lot of the rules, regulations, and obligations of the tax collector is governed by statute. So we did not want to go off the avenue for the tax collector and make sure the tax collector's statutory obligations remain, however, still address the issue, which is to assure that any taxes that may be falling off a grand list after 15 years are in fact at least looked at by the BET and to determine whether or not it should be collected. So that's what the tax collection policy is before you. It essentially is a reiteration of the statute, which has the tax collector come to the BET in March of every year, have Heather or any future tax collectors determine why a tax should be uncollectible, have the BET accept it, and then it can be added to the suspense list. One thing I will add is that the suspense list, if it's added, does not mean that later on if the tax collector finds facts which would make that tax collectible, it doesn't mean that we cannot go back and foreclose it. It's just a matter of a useful discussion to make sure that that's being monitored. I did in fact also include in the packet an update, a very bare bones update of the litigation that I'm handling on those matters and the tax foreclosure matters. Most of them we were able to get title searches in time to get the foreclosures filed in time to preserve each grand list. Some we were not. Unfortunately, the real estate market has made it very difficult to get title searches back in time. Title searches have been busier than ever. So some of the title searches we were not able to get back in time, but we will just pursue those in due course. So Heather and I will entertain any questions on the policy or the list that the BET may have.
Thank you. We appreciate it. The 4 liaisons did work with both the tax collector, just for information purposes, and Attorney Kokinos in reviewing and coming up with the policy statement that you see before us. Any questions, comments? Nothing from Mr. Raymer? Yes, Ms. Moriarty.
Thank you. Out of an abundance of caution, I'm not sitting next to you since I have had a COVID exposure. I am not positive at the moment, and hope to stay that way.
Yes, we
But
hope so
the
too.
question I had is, once it's really a question for the chair. The BET intends to improve this policy. Once we do, it's a BET policy, if I understand correctly, and it goes in our policy manual book. Is that what's expected as for the matter of record?
It was a question I was going to ask Mr. Kokinos, because I wasn't really sure of what we were doing with this. I know that the policy will sit with the tax collector, and certainly it could be in our procedures book as well, since it is a matter of public record anyway. But that was one of the questions I was actually going to ask you as well.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I don't think that a formal vote and acceptance of the policy is necessary. We did discuss on the liaison level of how we're going to be able to monitor this. My suggestion was, obviously, the tax collector's office is going to have this in the policy book. I think that the BET can have that in their policy book. But I'm also going to suggest to the law department that there be a reminder for whomever the town attorney is, that when it comes to July of every year, that there needs to be a discussion with the tax collector, or prior to July, needs to be a discussion with the tax collector to look at these lists, because that July will be when the next tax may roll off. So I think we'll have 2 levels, being the tax collector's office and the town attorney's office, to know that we have to bring this to the BET.
And slight, unrelated issue, but just to identify that, I think when we get the report in March, certainly I personally would not just want a list of the properties that have rolled off the tax rolls, but to get more information on the aging of properties so that we can all anticipate what's coming down the pike and what's the strategy for addressing those. So I just say that in the meeting to give notice to the tax collector to be prepared for that question.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Raymer.
So maybe then a recap of some of the history might be appropriate. I raised this with the BET a year ago in October, concerned at that point that there were a number of accounts, I didn't know the number at that point, for which an element of their taxes had already passed through the 15-year uncollectability, I'll call it a statute of limitations. It's actually, the statute defines it as an uncollectability, not quite a statute of limitations. At that point, the sitting chair at that point was Mr. Mason, asked that the existing liaisons to the assessor act as the liaisons also with the collector and get to the bottom of it and to report back. The charter specifies that the BET sets policy for the tax collector, and what we have before us is a policy statement. So with all due respects to Attorney Kokinos, who, how's the name again? Kokinos? Is that how I'm supposed to?
Close enough.
Okay, to Attorney Kokinos, who I have a very high regard for. This is our policy statement as well, and I do think it should be voted on by the full BET as an acceptance of policy and go into our BET handbook at some appropriate location. It also, I think, should be mentioned publicly that in the review then of accounts that followed, it did appear that there were 9 accounts for which there were a small amount of taxes had passed through the 15-year barrier. I think the aggregate amount of all 9 of them was an approximate sum of about $40,000 at the time of the write-off. I endorse completely the comments of Mrs. Moriarty that we should be staying in touch with this. And indeed, the statute requires, it's the very section that's cited in the draftsmanship of Attorney Kokinos, it's 12-165, specifies that the tax collector shall not less frequently than annually come forward and present to the finance board of the town those accounts that she believes are uncollectible. And the determination of uncollectability is not the function of the tax collector. It's a decision that gets made at the tax collector's recommendation, gets made by the finance board. In this case, it's the Board of Estimate and Taxation. So this is a codification of that. The only thing that this adds to that statute is that we address the question of what was the most convenient timing for both the BET and the tax collector, who has busy periods in her schedule and then not slack, but less busy periods in your schedule. And the suggestion was that March would be a good point for doing this annually. So that's the reason why March appears in this. Lastly, I think everybody was concerned that there were other accounts that hadn't yet passed through the 15-year statute, but were aging, some at 14, some at 13. I think there were as many as 6 that were at least 11 years or more, and that was a source of concern. And some of those, I think 2 of them, are approaching the 15-year statute, which was the reason for our vigor in asking Attorney Kokinos to be bringing these enforcement actions. And we are satisfied that the cooperation between the tax collector and Attorney Kokinos is extremely high, and that work does seem to be going forward. So I look forward to having gotten this back in hand. The rest of the functions of the tax collector really are laid out by statute. And there were things that were discussed at some point of being put into a policy statement, but frankly, they're covered by statute and really don't need to be addressed. The statute requires that the tax collector energetically pursue the collection of taxes and lays out this process for dealing with those that are uncollectible. And I think the statute speaks very well for itself. I do think that this is a worthwhile addition to cite the March date and to make it clear to both offices, both the BET and to the tax collector's office, what's expected. And I do believe, I would request that this resolution be voted on by the full board.
Ms. Tarkington.
Yes, I would support that also. The BET is responsible for the policy of this department, and putting this in our handbook, I think, makes sense. And I'm not aware of anything other than the information ourselves going to this book without being approved by this board. So I would recommend approval or acceptance, either way, but something before it goes in.
Mr. Drake.
I think the policy is a good idea, and I'll be voting for it, and I think the BET should vote for it. But I would, if you all wish, I would make a proposal that it not go in our book. In our book of procedures, you can see it's a book of BET procedures. It has weighty things like debt policy and how we keep our books and a bunch of things that weigh a great deal. This one is 3/4 of an inch long, and it requires really, it's not even so much a BET procedure, it's asking the tax collector to do something, like send us a report. Mr. Minarski sends us an inch-thick report of our annual comprehensive financial report, and that's not a BET policy. So my recommendation is we approve it. I don't think it belongs in our book. It doesn't rise to that level of importance, in my opinion.
Thank you. Ms. Carmick?
Well, before I go into what I was proposing to say, I think that would be up to the Policy and Procedures Committee of the BET as to whether or not it gets submitted and placed in the reference book. But what I wanted to add, and what we touched upon earlier today in the Audit Committee, was that we had discussed procedures within the tax collector's office. And there's no need for that to rise necessarily to the BET. But on the other hand, to ensure that there are procedures that the tax collector formulates in writing so that each time you have a new tax collector, there's a clear guideline as to what you're doing. And certainly there are statutory provisions that will support what you're setting out, but it would be helpful from a timeline because we are dealing with timing of when we address these uncollectible accounts. So to be helpful as to how, when you start looking at them to decide what you're going to do about them. And so I just hope that that will continue, and I hope that Attorney Kokinas will actually support and work with you on that so that they reflect the statutes, but they also fill out, if you will, a little bit of what your office is doing to ensure that it is addressing uncollectibles before they get to the 15-year point. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Drake?
Ms. Crumick, I agree completely with your statements. Do you want to make a motion that this go to the Policy and Procedures Committee?
Can I suggest?
I would suppose, I would assume we have to vote on the policy as BET. Then you can decide and discuss whether or not you want to submit it to the Policy and Procedure Committee.
I'm going to propose the following motion, that that we accept the tax delinquency policy statement and that we refer it to the Policy and Procedures of the Committee of the BET.
I'll second that.
Okay. Do we have further discussion? You want to take?
Can we have a roll call on that?
Can I ask?
Yes.
Point of order, just for clarification. The motion that's on the floor then is a motion to accept this as a policy of the BET regarding the tax collector. And what's being referred to the Policy and Procedures Committee is only whether it has a proper place in the book?
No.
Are you referring to the Policy and Procedures Committee whether or not to adopt this resolution?
No.
Please clarify. I'm not understanding. I'm sorry to be so dense.
And that's okay. That we accept the policy statement and that we refer the policy statement to the Policy and Procedures Committee of the BET to determine whether or not it should be included in the book.
Okay, that sounds like the right motion to me. I'll vote for that. Thank you.
Catherine recorded that motion, all good. So let's have a vote, a roll call vote. Ms. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod? I'm sorry my sequence is wrong, but go ahead, Mr. Weisbrod.
Yes.
Mr. Deuce?
Yes.
Mr. Raymer?
Yes.
Ms. Vasiliotis?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington?
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty? Yes. Ms. Crumick?
Yes.
Ms. Hess?
Yes.
Ms. Cruiser?
Yes.
That was unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to come tonight, too.
Thank you all very much.
Happy
Appreciate it.
holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Okay, next up is the approval of the annual comprehensive financial report for the year ending June 30th, 2021. And we have a report from the Audit Committee.
The report from the Audit Committee is very brief. Mr. Minarski and the outside auditors presented the annual comprehensive financial report to the audit committee today, and we had a good discussion. It's a great deal of work, and it was done very professionally, both by Mr. Menarche and his staff and RSM, and so it's moved as by a committee, and Pete, if you want to make any remarks, we'd love to hear from you.
The state statutes, is that on? The state statutes require that you file your annual report with the Office of Policy and Management, OPM, no later than 6 months after the end of the year, which would be December 31st. If you need an extension, you have to request it before December 1st. Also, in addition to the annual comprehensive financial report, you have to file a single and federal audit. As you all know, last year, because of the coronavirus relief fund, Assessor monies, et cetera, the auditors were hamstrung and had to wait from the Federal Office of Management and Budget to complete their audit, and extensions were requested for the state and federal single audits into February, 2 extensions. Tonight, you have before you to vote to accept the annual comprehensive financial report. The single audits are, I've requested an extension through January 31st, so you vote for them at a later date. Also, we're required by December 31st to file this document with the Government Finance Officers Association. You see me come before you every year, once a month each year, and we apply for the Certificate of Conformance. It's an award that we get every year, and we've gotten it through June 30th, 2020. So we're also required, when this audit is completed, to submit it to the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association. So for tonight, you're just voting on the ACFR, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. Any questions?
Mr. Raymer.
Back in November, we received through the chair a copy of the letter from the town attorney summarizing the various cases pending in litigation against the town.
Yep.
In each year at about this time, usually at the audit committee, but sometimes maybe I receive it first at the full BET, we then receive a version of the letter which assigns best approximations by the town attorney's office of the valuation of the exposure of the town on each, so that a dollar value can be calculated by the auditors on what's the exposure of the town on the pending litigation. I haven't seen that version of the letter. Is that version of the letter available?
The November 9th legal letter?
No, I've seen the November 9th letter. That version doesn't place values on any of the cases.
I'm not
There's
aware.
There's normally a second copy of that, which places, or we receive separate. I think a year ago, what we received actually was a spreadsheet from Attorney Marino, in which he listed out the cases and had values on it. But I've not seen any valuation on the pending cases at this point.
Ms.
I don't know how
Tarkington.
an auditor reaches a determination of the materiality of pending cases if the auditor doesn't know what the estimated value in the view of the attorneys are of what's the town's exposure on these cases.
I can answer that.
Okay.
Through the chair.
Go ahead.
Can Ms. Tarkington comment first?
Yeah, Ms. Tarkington.
So I was just going to comment on the spreadsheet itself. We did receive the spreadsheet in the Budget Committee meetings in executive session. That is where we've received it in the past. We received it in February, and I believe Mr. Koki knows, together with another colleague, came and presented it. So I expect that, once again, the spreadsheet that you're referring to will be seen by the Budget Committee and any other BET members in the month of February, when we are meeting with the Law Department on their particular hearing day.
That would work for me. I mean, the point is really to be able to understand the values. The auditor, of course, would have wanted it, I think, to approve the audit. But I'm not the auditor, and that's not my interest. My interest mostly is in our BET function, principally in the spring, when we're making a determination on various things, not the least of which is the amount to be applied to the risk fund, if any.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reimer.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not quite done. Please don't cut me off. Can I be indicating, understanding from the controller that we should be expecting to receive that in the spring?
I think that if you go by past practice, and this occurred in February, as Ms. Tarkington said, that the Budget Committee does get the information, and certainly that will be communicated to the town attorney as well, and I think she knows the expectations. But Mr. Minarski, you were also going to comment on the auditor?
Yeah, I could, now it's clear what you're looking for. I was confused. You're referring to the subsequent spreadsheet that was done in February. Let me go back. There was the town attorney, Vincent Marino, who met with the auditors a year ago in the month of December. I was not present. Mr. Marino met with the auditors in the through a Zoom meeting, and they methodically went through about 50 cases. And the auditors and the town attorney came up with a number which was $2,600,000. Mr. Drake multiple times requested the backup, the work papers, to substantiate that number. They refused to give it to us. They said it was confidential in their work papers. So
Who's the they in that case?
The auditors,
Okay,
the partner in particular.
Thank you.
I respected that. And so the number in the footnotes for what at that time was the comprehensive annual financial report was $2,600,000. Mr. Marino left. In the month of February, he's left. That gentleman that just sat there came up with, helped with the number. I don't know if Mr. Herbst helped or Ms. Schellenberg in February and came up with the number you're referring to. So because they refused Mr. Drake's request to come up with a spreadsheet to substantiate the $2.6 million, I asked and they allowed me to sit in with the meeting December 1st.
This year?
Yep, December 1st. Barbara Schellenberg, myself, the auditor, and the partner that gave the presentation this morning methodically went through every single case, including the tax assessments and the Charo cases, the human rights organization.
Right.
Because of COVID and the very little movement in the court system, the letter from last year was basically identical to the letter this year. So between the letter last year, the February presentation, and multiple executive sessions, and I'm not going to say the cases that were talked about in executive session, the BET members have been fully apprised of what's in that legal letter because it hasn't substantially changed. They put in the same number, $2,600,000. So what is going to happen is the law department, to satisfy you, is going to come in February. I shouldn't say you, it's going to satisfy all 12 of you, 8 of you, plus the 4 that are behind me, in coming up with a number to put into the risk fund. The budget guidelines currently have a 0 number in there, and I understand it's controversial. So to try to wrap this all up, I think you're going to be happy in February, but right now, there's the legal letter of a year ago and the legal letter of right now is basically the same. We had one settlement for $50,000 around January, February last year. We had one small settlement for about $4,500. This year, we've had one settlement from FEMA for $90,000. None of the large cases of which you're interested in were settled. I hope that answers your question.
But yeah, I think it does. You're saying fundamentally 2 things to me. Number one, that the cases have been reviewed to the satisfaction of the auditors, and they've received input from the law department as to what the nature of those cases and what the exposure is. And
Correct.
number 2, that there would be a fresh process of placing a value that will be available to the BET people in time for the budget process in the coming late winter and spring.
I can't promise you the second part, because that gentleman, if he's still here, is going to be the person that compiles those numbers.
I don't think
But-
actually
but-
Attorney
but
Castinos will be,
someone in that
Attorney
office.
Schellenberg will. Mhm.
Yeah, that was my point. Is someone in that
And the law
department.
committee has raised this with the town attorney, and they understand, the expectations, so,
Okay, thank you.
All right. Great.
thank you.
Anything else on the,
to move.
the acceptance for the annual comprehensive financial report?
So yes, I did move the report, I think, when I made my committee report, so it's before us.
Okay.
Want a
And
second?
I don't think we need a second since it came from a
from
committee,
committee.
but thank you very much. I'll propose, yes, Laura?
I just wanted to offer the caveat that in the committee this morning, we said subject to minor edits. So there are a couple grammatical typos, maybe a word change here or there. So let's just add that to the motion if you don't mind.
I'll second that. Thank you for remembering from this morning.
Okay, so just to recap, we are moving the annual comprehensive financial report for the year ending June 30th, 2021, subject to minor edits that the audit committee has recommended.
On that, I'll take a voice vote. Ms. Cruiser,
Yes.
Ms. Hess,
Yes.
Ms. Crumick,
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty, Ms. Tarkington,
Yes?
Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Fasciotis,
Yes.
Mr. Raymer,
Yes.
Mr. Deuce,
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod,
Yes.
Ms. Erickson.
Yes.
That was unanimous.
Thank you. Moving on, approval of the BET regular committee meeting minutes of November 22nd, 2021,
I'll move the minutes.
moved by Mr. Drake, seconded by Ms. Tarkington, and Ms. Crumick, you had a minor,
Two minor.
Two minor
I
changes.
brought one to your attention that I thought was your call as to whether you wanted to make that change. But I just wanted to point out that I just realized going back over it, on the last page, under updates for ARP committee, the references, the dates are wrong. You've got January 2021, it should be 22, and that's true in 3 places. There are 3 different dates that should all be corrected to 2022, so that the sentence will read, Mr. Branyan proposed the following timetable: January 2022 presentation for BET approval, February 2022 distribution to the RTM for its approval at its March 2022 meeting.
thank you.
And then I had a question for the chair that only the chair can answer.
And that question was, I have to get.
Whether or not under chairman's report, it reads, annual report financial statements. Did you actually mean that to be annual comprehensive financial report, a reference to this very document we've been discussing?
And the answer is yes.
Okay. So there'll be a replacement of just those four.
And thank you very much, Ms. Crumick. And with those 4 changes, I'll just ask, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed? That is unanimous.
Thank you. I've been asked to move the public recognition of the outgoing members to before the executive session for fear that we are going to lose whatever audience we have. So I am going to honor that request, if that is okay with this body. If I don't hear any objection, then we will go on. Yes.
Can I indulge you for a 90-second recess?
Recess? Sure. Okay, so we'll take a quick 90-second, and I'm holding you to the 90-second recess.
It's that way, and then we'll pass it back the other way.
Sure.
Very good, I've already had 2.
Me too.
Pete,
Here, you can set it the other way.
You're forgiven. I know.
Oh, my God. Cheesecake? They're not Oreos, but they're close.
Thank you, Jill.
It is unbelievable. 5-year AAAs are still at 7. That soon will end. It'll be interesting to see what this looks like.
It should end sooner.
Yeah.
The Fed has really messed us up.
Yeah, well, I think today they indicated it.
Yeah,
Party's over.
They finally did it, Nick.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what this report looks like.
We have Wayne Foss here. What we got was actually.
Live issuance. When did Pete say, January 5th?
Interlacing evaluations of the end of the year.
Oh, my goodness gracious. No, thank you.
It's quite good as cheesecake. I had a piece earlier. No.
No, thanks.
You're gonna have to go on the road.
Thanks, Roland. Okay, we're reconvening. As you may know, we will be losing 4 members of this body. No, we don't need to close the door. We're not in executive session. We're doing the public the comments. So we are going to be losing 4 members of this body, and that's a lot of people. So I'm going to take this in order of seniority as far as service on this board. So the first person that we'd like to recognize tonight is Beth Crummick, who's going to be speaking. You. Okay.
I am going to be speaking with joy. I speak with joy of our dear colleague, Beth Crummick. So, you know, many of you may not know, and Beth may not remember this, that I was actually one of the first people, well, it's mutual, but I should say Beth was one of the first people that I met when I came to Greenwich. Because I lived at 34 Perry Ridge and she lives across the street. And she was, at the time, going back to 1985, a very engaged and very active person in the community, even though she was relatively new to the community herself. And so that sets the stage for what I want to say, and that we have before us, leaving this board, one of the most committed public servants that I can think of in the town, and she will be deeply missed. I'm not going to speak for a long time, but I will mention a few things. One, I like to think of Beth in a way as the conscience of this board in many ways, and she has always spoken out for the less privileged and maybe the more vulnerable in a way that comes from the heart, and that really reflects her values and has made a tremendous impact on me personally, but I'm sure on all of us. She's now completed 3 terms, which is an extensive period of time, and throughout those 6 years has demonstrated this steadfast commitment. In particular, she's worked most avidly on the Nathaniel Witherall, both as liaison to that and part of the strategic planning committee. She's been a leader on the law committee and has a deep understanding of the governance of this BET is even reflected at some of the comments that she's made tonight and how the procedures work and how the thing functions and should function. She will be deeply missed, and so her involvement with the HR committee as well has been an area that I've learned a lot from. And I could go on, and I would, but I think I will stop at this point to simply say, we'll miss you very much, Beth. You're an exemplary public servant and someone who has set the path for many of us on the BET. Thank you.
And Beth, on behalf of the BET and the town of Greenwich, I just want to give you I got to pick up the bottle. A small token of appreciation. Leslie, your purse. And thank you very much. And it was a pleasure serving with you on the law committee and the HR committee. Okay, next up we have Andy Deuce.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Andy, it's been a pleasure working with you on the BET. Andy has done a lot of very important things for our town. The first couple that come to mind is our debt policy that he successfully shepherded through a lot of very well-done thinking. Also, the whole item we're going to touch upon in executive session later tonight was a very important topic. Andy was the leader of. He's been a leader on this Witherell committee, which is soon going to give birth to something worthwhile. And so I kind of feel like I've been following Andy around for a few years. It's been a pleasure to be Andy's work wife. I've really enjoyed it. And one of Andy's advantages is, it's extraordinary. He has Nancy Cooper at home, which is like having two brains. So it's a big advantage in trying to get things done. And one other thing, there never was a BET member who got more done with fewer words than Andy Deuce. And so I'm going to propose that henceforth on BET meetings and all committee meetings, that the chairs be entitled to award the Andy Deuce Recognition of Efficiency Award to those persons who get the most done with the least words. And the first awarding of this award would be this evening. Thank you, Andy Deuce, for great service.
And Andy, also on behalf of the town of Greenwich and the BET, small token, and don't drink it all at once.
Two things. Nice.
Okay, next up is Deborah Hess and Ms. Tarkington.
Thank you, Deborah, for your 2 terms of BET service. As BET members, we are grateful to you and appreciate your contributions. As a colleague and friend, Deborah is warm, intelligent, organized, and arrived in the BET with a current financial business background. Deborah is great and precise with numbers and can quickly run through a spreadsheet. That was particularly evident as we adjusted capital projects and she could compute the capital tax levy instantaneously. Deborah, you have also left valuable legacies behind. An example is the Accounts Payable Initiative. When fully implemented, this new Munis module will mitigate risk, improve the use of technology, and lower costs for the town's purchasing department and payables process. We also learned during the budget cycle that you and other members of the budget committee spend downtime watching The Bachelor and the Hallmark Channel. And while you take no prisoners with your schedule, you are generous with time for a good lunch, drinks with colleagues, or a fun dinner. We will miss you and wish you the best, Deborah. And we expect to see you continue to be very involved in Greenwich. Thank you very much for your service.
And Deborah, you too get a small token of appreciation from the town. Enjoy. And finally, our junior member. Harry has had the distinction of being the first BET member in history of serving in 2 different millennia. His first tour of duty began in 1992 and ended 6 years later in 1998. His last budget in 1998, passed by the RTM on May 11th, 1998, totaled $217 million and change. The Griff Golf Course was called the Bruce Memorial Park Golf Course, and there was no modified pay-as-you-go. Ah, the good old days. Fast forward to 2021, when Mike Mason left our board and ended his decades of volunteerism, our caucus was faced with filling his vacancy. Many names were discussed, but Harry stood out among all the rest. Since there was only a few months left to the term, as a former BET member, he could hit the ground running, and he did that in spades. His can-do attitude was another plus. After joining, he served as liaison to public safety, and it is really the first time I can ever recall a fire chief asking if a BET member could stay on as liaison. Sorry, Harry, after tonight, your tenure as liaison is over. But seriously, thank you again for your service. We really appreciate your stepping up to the plate in a time of need. And we wish you all the best. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you around town.
Thank you,
Thanks,
very
Harry.
much appreciated.
No problem. Okay, so with that, we're going to be entering into executive session. Hate to be the Debbie Downer, but here we go.
Chair.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I know you
That's right. I'm sorry. I don't know if the former, the soon-to-be former BET members want to just say anything as a farewell. So Deborah, go ahead.
So I've really enjoyed serving with all of you over the past 4 years, and it's certainly been a very interesting time. I'm proud of the efforts we've made on behalf of the residents of our town to spend their hard-earned dollars responsibly, keep taxes low while funding a robust budget which delivers high service levels. I'm so appreciative of all the new friends that I've made. I've learned so much about Greenwich and how our town operates. It is true when they talk about how great the impact of local government is on its residents. I'm especially appreciative of all the hard work of the finance department, Pete and Roland getting to know you, our assessor and all of the others, the legal department that we work with on such a regular basis. I'm just so grateful for the countless hours spent by so many of the community volunteers to better our town. In particular, I'm even more respectful than ever the role the RTM plays in our town governance process and the dedication of so many of our RTM members. As I've spoken to my fellow BET members one-on-one, it is so apparent that we see things similarly as we serve our town and regardless of our party, generally agreeing on the importance of most things. We need to resist letting politics get in the way. So my hope for the incoming BET is to put aside the past and move forward in an even more positive and collaborative way. That way, together, you'll make Greenwich even better. I am so fortunate and blessed to be part of this amazing community we call Greenwich. Thank you for all that you do to serve, for those who've served and are continuing to serve our town. You are, we all are, making a difference. Thank you so much.
Beth, go ahead.
I would concur with all that Deborah said. I just wanted to thank, there are several departments I work very closely with, the law department, the human resources department, the finance department, the tax assessor and the tax collector, and I do appreciate all the work they have done and continue to do for this town and the way in which they helped us understand our portfolio and the work that we needed to do. I want to thank Catherine Sider. When I was clerk, you were there religiously making sure that you at least were trying to keep the minutes, which for this group is not an easy process. and I recognize that. I guess in stepping away, the one thing that I hope all of you who are going to continue and are going to step on to the BET, remember that behind all these numbers are people. They're children who are having their first crack at education. They are teachers and staff who are trying to help those children reach their potential. They are clients of the Human Services Department who may need some help. And I think we should continue to try to help them. And the other area which David touched upon, but the seniors in this community, and certainly Nathaniel Witherell, I hope that the decisions that are made will be in the best interest of the elderly, because the residents there are at the end of their life. And that is a very precious time, and it will be for all of us. And I hope that you remember that. I understand budgeting. I understand it better now than I did many years ago. But at the base of all of it are people and what their lives are going to be like. And my hope is that the decisions that are made make Greenwich the best community it can be for everyone that loves to live here. Thank you, all of my colleagues, for 6 amazing years. It has been quite a ride, and I feel very joyful that I can step off and know that it's in good hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Andy?
Okay, my turn. At the risk of having Bill rewrite his script, I have a couple of comments. I'm standing on some very broad shoulders next to me here, and Beth. I need to give a shout out, especially for Natasha Yemetz. I'm conflating there. Our town treasurer, who is extremely capable. You never see her come to these meetings, but she's really a rocket. And you'll see some of her handiwork when we go into executive session. I mean, we see Pete and Roland and Amina every meeting, it seems, but you never see Natasha, and she's very good. And I just want to give her a special shout out. I also will add, I never really had any intention of being here. Be honest, I'm kind of like the accidental politician, but I'm here, and I must say, I have really enjoyed and appreciated my 4 years here. The whole look, this town should not work if you look at it on paper, but we have great staff, we have great volunteers around the town, but I must say, my 11 colleagues here are phenomenal. I mean, they're hardworking, dedicated, and just very, very can-do. And I really enjoy working with each and every one of my colleagues, and I really do mean that. And I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Harry?
Just a quick note to say thank you for the opportunity to serve again. And what's really impressed me is the amount of work that everybody does today compared to what I remember from the 90s. I think you've shown some great results. You've made an awful lot of progress in that period of time. And I think it's underappreciated. And I'll just give a shout out to the 4 new people coming on. I'm sure I speak for all of us leaving the board that we're all available to you anytime you got questions, anything you want, we're here to help. So thank you again.
Thank you, Harry. Okay, with that, we will now be entering into executive session at 7:52.
Take a motion.
Motion.
So moved.
Moved by Raymer, seconded by Mr. Dre. I heard him first. Okay, so I ask that everybody turn off their mics. Let me go back on mic here. The resolution with a Scribner's error in the third whereas clause, where May 24th becomes May 24th, 2021. Do I have a second? I'm going to let Andy do second it. And all in favor? I'm sorry, I'm taking your role here.
Yes, yes. Right.
Trying to move it along here.
Well, thank you. Let's do a voice vote. Ms. Cruiser?
Yes.
Ms. Hess,
Yes.
Ms. Crumick,
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty. Yes. Ms. Tarkington,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
I abstain. Ms. Costellotis.
Yes.
Mr. Raymer.
Yes.
Mr. Deuce.
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod.
Yes.
Ms. Erickson.
Yes.
That passed 11-01.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so just some brief last remarks. I want to thank you all for a successful end to a most interesting year. We've operated under very difficult and challenging times. Despite COVID, we passed a budget and we ran our committee and regular meetings with few or no hiccups. And that's also thanks to our support group, Pete, Roland, and the rest of the finance department. Every individual in that department makes the BET shine. So thank you to them on behalf of the BET, and please express that to them, Pete. I wish you all a very happy and healthy holiday. If you're traveling, safe travels. To the outgoing members, thank you again. And to those returning and to those who will be beginning their term, see you in the new year. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Laura.
Second.
Seconded by Miriam. Happy holidays.
Happy.
Yes.